Tennessee Titans running back Tony Pollard is without a doubt the team's MVP at this point in the season. More midseason awards on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. On today's show, we're doing some sort of mid-season awards. I'm going to tell you the Titans MVP, the Titans most disappointing player, the offensive and defensive player of the year, and we'll talk about the rookies on both sides of the ball. Before we get into it, do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one, because you smell that? I'm smelling a potential Titans upset this weekend, and crossover Thursday is tomorrow. My game plan preview is the next day. You're not going to want to miss those, and I'll be live on Sunday after the game against the Houston Texans. But with that being said, we have to start with the Tennessee Titans' most valuable player, and quite honestly, there is no debate whatsoever about who that is, and it is Tony Pollard, running back, free agent signing. Tony Pollard has been a godsend for this team. I mean, with the struggles that the Titans have had in the pass game and their reliance on the run game, and then Tajay Spears being injured for quite a bit of the season, Tony Pollard has just been absolutely fantastic. He's been everything that we could have asked for and more. And it's funny, you know, a lot of Titans fans are crying over spilt milk with Derrick Henry choosing to go to the Baltimore Ravens, when the reality is the best player on the team for the Titans this year has been the running back, Tony Pollard, who replaced Derrick Henry. And quite frankly, Tony Pollard has been better this year than Derrick Henry was last year for the Tennessee Titans. So to me, Tony Pollard, again, hands down, unquestionable. He is the MVP of the team. 160 carries, 681 rushing yards. That's 4.3 yards per carry. He's got 3 touchdowns on the season, add 30 catches for 168 yards. And think about the Tennessee Titans' 2 wins on the year. So look, I get it. I know that there are going to be people rolling their eyes at doing midseason awards when the Titans are 2-8. What's the reason of giving out awards? Well, at the end of the day, we needed to take stock of where players are. We need to give some players who are playing well credit as well. And Tony Pollard is the number 1 player on that list. Again, look at their 2 wins this season. The Titans have won 2 games. And in the first win that the Titans had against the Miami Dolphins, they barely threw the ball in the second half because they gave it to Tony Pollard so much. He had 108 yards and a touchdown in that game. Then you go to the Tennessee Titans' second win against the New England Patriots. 154 total yards for Tony Pollard. He carried them in that game. So, to me, you could maybe look at other names if you wanted to, but I don't see any other player that is even close to take an MVP or even being in the discussion with Tony Pollard for the MVP of this football team. He has clearly been the most valuable player, and what a great free agent signing by Ran Carthon to bring him into this offense. I saw somebody say it on Twitter. You can follow me there at Tic Tac Titans. But Tony Pollard is like DeMarco Murray in 2016 and 17. Like, that is the impact that he's had on this team, where he just immediately becomes the hub of the offense. So shout out to Tony P. Glad to have him back in Tennessee. What a great signing by Ran Carthon. And when he signed, I was like, I don't know. Do we want to give Tony Pollard a big deal? But the reality is his salary cap hit is like 1% of the salary cap. Great structure on the contract and a fantastic player who the Titans are lucky to have. Now, we do have to look at the opposite of that. Who has been the most disappointing player in 2024 for the Titans? And for me, although he's had his 2 best games of the season in back-to-back weeks, it's Will Levis. The reality is we expected more, and he may have had 2 of his best games of the season in the past 2 weeks, but we cannot forget that first month of the year where Will Levis truly killed this team's season. He killed the team's season with the mistakes against Chicago, the mistake against the Jets, the pick 6 against the Packers. Will Levis killed this season in the first month. He killed it. And then in the game 4 against Miami, he throws an interception right away and then makes a stupid decision to jump and dive out of bounds and hurts his shoulder, and then he can't even play for a month. So, again, he may have had his best 2 games of the year, the last 2 games, but we cannot forget what happened at the beginning of the season. And Will Levis has been a tremendous disappointment overall this year from what the expectations were coming into it. Maybe expectations were too high. You could make that argument. That's perfectly fine. But no matter what your expectations were, Will Levis has not come close to meeting those expectations. In his 7 games, 1-6. Now, it's not like the Titans have won a bunch of games without him either. They only won 1 without him, so not going to hold the record against him necessarily, but 65% completion percentage, 1,169 yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He's fumbled the ball 4 times as well. I mean, it's just not quite good enough. And I do just want to say one thing. I saw some reaction to my episode yesterday saying I'd rather roll with Levis in 2025. Some of you somehow make the leap to, you believe in Will Levis. You think that Will Levis is the future. No, I don't. I want to draft a quarterback in 2026. I don't think that Will Levis is the future. I don't think that Will Levis is the face of the franchise, the quarterback that's going to lead the Titans. I'm talking about 2025. I would rather roll with Levis in 2025 over draft Sanders or Ward or pay Sam Darnold $40 million a year. Like, just because I want to roll with Levis in 2025 doesn't mean that I believe in Will Levis long-term. And the fact that some of you guys don't have enough intelligence to decipher that, even though it was plain and simple, honestly, it just makes me worried about society. But I won't get into my nihilistic rants on today's show. I do want to give a nice runner-up to L'Jarius Sneed for most disappointing player of 2024 so far. Sneed has been out for, it's going to be 6 weeks now. And the couple of weeks that he did play were not good. So, L'Jarius Sneed certainly, whereas MVP is open and shut case, most disappointing player between Levis and Sneed is quite the battle. But I'll go with Levis because obviously quarterback is so important. But positivity all the way out from here. Offensive and defensive player of the year so far and rookie of the year on both sides so far. Before we get into it, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Look, Prize Picks is the most fun and the easiest way to play daily fantasy sports. That's why they have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy sports accessible to all because all you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players and say more or less for a chance to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. So, here's an example of how it works. Again, you pick 2 to 6 players and just say whether they're going to do more or less than the Prize Picks projection. Jamar Chase, 79.5 receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes, 1.5 passing touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 59.5 receiving yards. Saquon Barkley, 79.5 rushing yards. More or less. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Zbiotics. Zbiotics has a pre-alcohol probiotic drink that is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. The pre-alcohol drink produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. I've used the pre-alcohol drink from Zbiotics. It absolutely made sure I was ready to go on Sunday to cover all the football action. Here's how you use it. Step 1, drink the pre-alcohol. Step 2, drink responsibly. Step 3, enjoy your tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Titans fans, let's continue today's sort of mid-season awards. We talked about the most valuable player, the most disappointing player for the Titans. Now I want to look at the offensive and defensive sides of the ball specifically, and the best player on both sides. Talk about the rookies as well, but we'll start with offensive player of the year. And look, obviously, Tony Pollard is the answer. If he's the MVP of the team and he plays on offense, he is the offensive player of the year. No doubt about it. But considering that we have already given Tony Pollard his flowers and his credit for what he's done for the Titans, I wanted to go with a different player for offensive player of the year. And for me, it's Calvin Ridley. You know, there are a lot of things about this season that have been disappointing, but Calvin Ridley is not one of them. Calvin Ridley has been fantastic. And not only has Calvin Ridley been fantastic just on the numbers that you see, he has been even better than expected. How many plays has Calvin Ridley had taken off the board where he was wide open or he scored a touchdown and it was called back by a penalty, or he was wide open and didn't get the football? How many times? I mean, I've talked about it every single week on here. I've showed it on tape as well. Calvin Ridley is dominating out there. And his numbers don't quite reflect just how good he's been. But if you watch the tape, you see how open he gets. You look at the separation data and see how often he's getting separation and how much separation he's getting from defenders. Calvin Ridley is always open like 7-Eleven, baby. He's been great for this team. And in a lot of key moments, Calvin Ridley has been the only positive that you could think of. I mean, Calvin Ridley literally kept the Titans in the game against the New York Jets. They went on to squander that, of course, but nonetheless, Calvin Ridley has 36 catches, 541 yards, and 4 total touchdowns. It's been a good season for Calvin Ridley, and honestly, he should have about 700 receiving yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns if things were, I don't want to say fair, because fair isn't reality in life, right? Life is not fair, but if things would have gone just a little bit better, that's what they would have looked like. And it's not Calvin Ridley's fault. It's simply not. And I want to address this as well, because I put out something about Calvin Ridley late last week, and I had somebody say, well, how can we ignore the drops? Well, going into the season, Calvin Ridley had going into this week, Calvin Ridley had 4 drops all year. That was like tied for 17th in the NFL. He's not even top 10 in drops. Not even close. And like, his drop percentage is not very high. You go look at, I continue to make this point. You go look at the last 5 seasons and who leads the NFL in drops. Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel. Like, are those players you want on your team or not? So I don't mean to excuse the drops, but Calvin Ridley's drops is such an over-exaggerated thing. It has not been a problem this year. It has not been a game killer. It has not affected the Titans season. And the positives that Calvin Ridley has brought to the table far, far outweigh and exceed any of the 4 drops that he's had on the year. Like, it's not even been a factor in reality. So shout out to Calvin Ridley. I do want to say, NWI, I did give Nick Westbrook-Akine some consideration here. I mean, he doesn't have the gaudy stats and everything like that, but 5 touchdowns on the year. I mean, NWI definitely deserves some love. And then J.C. Latham. Now, we'll talk about J.C. Latham here in a second, but having at least one offensive tackle who can hold down his assignment pretty much every game, it's invaluable, as Titans fans know very well. So, to me, J.C. Latham deserved to at least have his name mentioned here in NWI, but Calvin Ridley has been the Titans' most explosive offensive player this year, and with Tony Pollard already getting MVP, we'll spread love. It's the Brooklyn way, and give some to Calvin Ridley. But on the defensive side of the ball, this was actually tougher than I thought. I looked at Jeffery Simmons, of course, but Arden Key, a guy who I'm not super high on Arden Key. I wouldn't say I'm a key head or anything like that, but Arden Key deserves a lot of credit for this season. I mean, Arden Key has been a solid player for the Titans and better than I expected him to be. It hasn't been some major disaster with Arden Key. I mean, Landry and Key both have 5 sacks apiece. Now, I still think the Titans have a major need on the edge. They need another player added into that mix. They need a high-level elite edge rusher. Most of the best teams in the NFL do have that, but got to give some credit to Arden Key. But I did go with Jeffery Simmons. Simmons has the most pressures on the team with 29. He has 3 sacks on the season. He is the 8th highest graded interior defensive lineman in the NFL and overall grade per Pro Football Focus. He is the 6th best pass rushing defensive lineman in the NFL per Pro Football Focus. It was a slow start to the year for Jeffery Simmons, in my opinion. He wasn't fantastic early in the year, but over the last 3 weeks, I mean, he has been dominant. He has been incredible. And again, you wish that it would turn into wins, no doubt, but there are so many issues with this team. It's understandable why it's not turning into wins. I mean, but Simmons was so good against the Detroit Lions defensive line, like crazy. He ate up the Los Angeles Chargers interior defensive line. He cooked the Patriots. And this week against the Vikings, who have a good offense, Simmons was literally unblockable in the game. He was incredible. So, look, with interior defensive line play, in my opinion, it takes looking at the film to really see the impact. It's not going to be in the box score. You can't just go to ESPN.com and look at the stats and say who's better than who. And that'll be demonstrated when we talk about the defensive rookie of the year as well. But Jeffery Simmons has been fantastic over the last month of the season and been, again, a very slow start to the year for Jeff. But this second month of the year, he has been exactly what you pay for. So shout out to Big Jeff. He's my defensive player of the year, with runner-up being Arden Key, of course, with 5 sacks, 26 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 26 pressures. Arden Key has been solid for the Titans this year. But let's talk about the rookies. Again, positivity, optimism. The Titans' 2 top rookies from this year's draft class, absolutely cooking. Before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic, fundamental truths about our world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever, tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Titans fans, let's cap off today's sort of mid-season awards. We talked about MVP, most disappointing player, talked about offensive player, defensive player of the year so far. Now I want to talk about these rookies, because you look at the offensive side and the defensive side, there's clearly a standout on both sides, and it's exactly who we were hoping for. Before we get into it, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tennessee Titans content all year, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed. Stay subscribed for your second listen. Check out Locked On NFL. I'm the lead host of Locked On NFL, so if you went over there and subscribed, whether it be on YouTube or whatever podcast app that you use, I would definitely appreciate the support with that. Also, do want to let you guys know that I have a Will Levis film breakdown video that came out on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel on Tuesday afternoon, going over his best throws of the week. Really cool to see the high-level talent that Will Levis has on display. Even if I showed some of the bad stuff that I didn't like on my Twitter account at Tic Tac Titans on Monday night, you can go check that out too if you want the full picture. But Will Levis just has high-level arm talent, man. And if his brain could ever catch up to his body, he would be a good player. But, at this point at 25 years old, I guess it's hard to expect that to happen. But nonetheless, let's talk about some young players who are balling out. The offensive rookie of the year is without a doubt J.C. Latham. No question about it. He's been the second best rookie offensive tackle so far this year, behind Joe Alt, who is already a Pro Bowl level player in year one. But Latham's only allowed 3 sacks, 12 pressures. He's been mostly reliable. I would like to see him improve in the run game. Quite honestly, that could improve, which is surprising coming off his college tape where he was just an absolute bully in the run game. Hasn't been quite as good in the run game as I would have expected, but he's been better in pass blocking than I would have expected for his rookie season. So I'll take the trade-off, because the Titans certainly need the pass blocking help more than they need the run blocking help right now. But as I mentioned earlier in the show, to have an offensive tackle, especially at left tackle, who is so good so early on, he's only going to get better next year and the year after. And think about J.C. Latham in year 4. He is just going to be dominant, man. And that is exactly what the Tennessee Titans needed. You can build off of that. You have that solidified for a decade, hopefully. You know what I mean? What a promising start, especially considering the recent history of first-round picks for the Titans. Burks, obviously a complete disappointment. Don't even need to talk about Caleb Farley and Isaiah Wilson. I think everybody understands the situation there. And then Peter Skoronski played well. He had an incredible first game against the New Orleans Saints, and then had an emergency appendectomy. I mean, just cursed first-round picks. So for J.C. Latham to come out of the gates right away and be a good player, absolutely critical for the Titans. And one of the best things of this entire season is the play of J.C. Latham, one of the big bright spots. On the defense, and honestly, there was no one else I would even consider for Rookie of the Year on offense. I mean, Jaquan Jackson has barely played. Bryce Oliver, I guess. I mean, he's played in a couple of games, had 3 catches, but no, there's nobody even close. It's J.C. Latham by a long shot. Defensive Rookie of the Year. This is a little closer than we thought, because Jarvis Brownlee Jr. has played pretty good football overall. But T'Vondre Sweat, man, come on. Right now, T'Vondre Sweat is the 7th highest rated interior defensive lineman in run defense in the entire NFL. The entire NFL. He is a dominant run defender. He's had 10 pressures on the season, 0 sacks. But again, you're talking about a rookie nose tackle. It's going to be kind of par for the course. I'll be honest with you, I would have hoped for a little bit more in pass rush from T'Vondre Sweat. This was part of my concern with T'Vondre Sweat before the year, is that he wouldn't factor into the pass rush enough to be worthy of a second-round pick. You think about a guy like Braden Fisk, who went around the same pick as the Titans, who is constantly penetrating it in the backfield. But Sweat has been in the backfield a little bit more here recently. Wish he would have been able to get some of those sacks when he got penetration against Sam Darnold. But if you watched my film breakdown on T'Vondre Sweat, you would know that in college he missed a lot of sacks. He'd get into the backfield and miss the quarterback. So Hopefully that improves. But overall, even without the high-level pass rush play, he's been so good in the run game, getting double teams. Like, he's been what the Titans expected. And hopefully he just continues to improve in that pass rush and can get even better to become more of a factor there. But a pretty good start to his career for T'Vondre Sweat, and obviously a lot better than I was expecting on draft night. So shout out to T'Vondre Sweat. Again, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. had some penalties, with his physical play, but I don't mind. I think Jarvis Brownlee Jr. overall has been fantastic for a rookie cornerback, but I'll give the edge to T'Vondre Sweat in this one. Let me know your guys' picks for these awards down below. That's going to do it for me today, folks. Thumbs up on the video, tighten up down in the chat. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. Crossover Thursday is tomorrow. But as always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.